Welcome back to Whisper of the Night, a place where stories slip beneath your skin, where shadows speak truths we're too afraid to name in daylight. Tonight, I'll share with you a tale about reflections, about the quiet hunger to be loved, to be admired, to be more. It's a story of a woman who only wanted to be seen, who thought she'd finally found a way to become everything others expected. But sometimes the mirror that flatters us the most is the one that devours us in the end. This is the mirror that loved her, and the price she paid for a perfection that never truly existed. It was the kind of mirror no one would notice. Oval, cracked along one corner, the glass slightly warped, so the world inside looked a little softer than the one she lived in. The frame was cheap tin painted to look like silver, flaking at the edges where careless hands had touched it too many times. She found it in a thrift store after work when the sky was already bruising into dusk. She had wandered the aisles without thinking, anything to avoid going home to her small apartment that smelled of stale coffee and tired air. When she saw the mirror, she almost walked past it. But there was a sign taped above the shelf in faded red letters. "Take me home." It felt almost like a dare. She picked it up. The glass was cold under her fingers. For a moment, she thought she saw movement inside it, a shimmer in the corner, like something just out of sight. But when she blinked, it was only her reflection staring back, weary-eyed and ordinary. She told herself it was nothing, just a trick of the light. She paid $3 and carried it out into the evening, feeling a little foolish and a little curious. At home, she propped it against the wall beside the front door. Somewhere she'd see it every morning as she left for work. A last chance to check her hair, her makeup, her practiced expression, the one she wore like armour. The next morning she woke before the alarm, her chest already tight with the thought of the day ahead, the polite nods in the hallway, the fluorescent lit meetings where she smiled so much her jaw ached, the careful, bright small talk she served like sugar to everyone who expected it. She paused by the mirror on her way out. Just a glance, but something was different. Her hair looked smoother, falling over her shoulders as if it belonged in a shampoo commercial. Her skin was luminous, the dull shadows erased from under her eyes. Her smile, bright, effortless, like a woman who had never once doubted she was enough. She frowned, and the reflection softened, tilting her features into something graceful. It looked like her, but better, more confident, more likable. She touched the glass with cautious fingers. It was still cold, still real. Maybe she was imagining it. Maybe this was what she looked like to everyone else. That thought felt warm, strangely comforting, like stepping into a version of herself she had always wanted to believe in. All day she carried that warmth like a secret. She spoke up in meetings without rehearsing every word in her head first. She laughed, and the sound didn't feel brittle. Her supervisor complimented her presentation, and she accepted it without apologizing. No one knew what had changed, but she did. That night, when she came home, her whole body heavy with exhaustion, she stood in front of the mirror again, and it smiled back. Her best self, her most perfect self, the one she would have given anything to be. But she didn't realize yet, the giving had already begun. She started to wake up a little earlier each morning, just to have more time to stand there, to study the version of herself that the mirror offered. A version with bright eyes and a smile that seemed incapable of cracking. It felt harmless. Healthy, even. Wasn't everyone supposed to practice self-affirmation? Didn't every motivational podcast say, visualize your success, fake it till you make it? So she did. Every day she let the mirror remind her, you are admired, you are competent, you are everything they wish they were. And at work, people noticed. Her supervisor praised her more often. Small, glowing comments that felt like electricity on her skin. You've really come out of your shell. You're a natural leader. You're exactly what this team needs. She began to hold herself straighter in the elevator, to say good morning first, to laugh at things she didn't find funny, but with a warmth that sounded real. At lunch, her co-workers asked her advice, invited her into conversations she used to overhear from the edge of the room. It was like she'd finally been issued a passport into a country she'd watched from a distance her entire life. And every night, she returned home and stood in front of the mirror. Her reflection looked flawless. Her hair smooth, her posture regal, her eyes bright with gentle confidence. Sometimes she spoke to it, just to see her mouth move in perfect synchrony with that more perfect woman. "Today went well," she'd whisper, and the mirror woman would nod, smiling back. "Everyone likes you now." Nod, smile. "Of course they do!" She didn't notice when the mirror's surface started to look less like glass and more like still water. She didn't notice the subtle shift in her own expression when she turned away. And if she felt a little emptier, if her laughter came a beat too late, or her silences felt longer, she told herself it was the price of success. Everyone paid it, didn't they? It didn't happen all at once. At first it was just a feeling, a faint, prickling unease when she tried to leave the apartment without looking in the mirror first. A small nagging guilt if she skipped her morning ritual, like she was being rude, ungrateful. After all, the mirror had given her so much. A new life, a new self. Was it really so much to ask for a moment of her attention? She began spending longer in front of it. 5 minutes, then 10, then half an hour, memorizing every polished angle of her reflection. And when she finally tore herself away to go to work, she felt incomplete, like she'd left something vital behind. At the office, her performance only improved. She was promoted. Her face began to appear on company newsletters. Co-workers smiled at her in the halls. Warm, deferential, were expectant. They were used to her now. Used to the version of her that never faltered, never hesitated. The version the mirror had taught her to become. And the more they admired her, the more she felt obligated to maintain it. Some mornings when she stood before the glass, she could almost hear a voice, softer than thought, sliding against her skull like silk. If you want them to love you, you must give more. She wasn't sure what more meant, but she tried anyway. She stayed late at work, even when her vision blurred. She agreed to every request, every favour, every extra task. Her smile stretched thin but unbreakable. At night, she came home so exhausted she could barely lift her arms. Still, she stood in front of the mirror. Her reflection looked as composed as ever, unbothered, untouched by fatigue. And when she asked in a voice that barely sounded like her own, "Am I doing enough?" the mirror woman nodded, just once. But the nod felt like a verdict. It was subtle at first. A hollow ache in her chest that no amount of praise could fill. A dull ringing in her ears after long meetings when the applause faded and the silence returned. When she looked in the mirror, she still saw the woman everyone adored. But she was starting to wonder if that woman had ever been real. One morning, she noticed something strange, a hairline crack running down the glass right between her eyes. She tried to wipe it away, but her fingertip only traced the fracture, cool and sharp. The reflection didn't flinch, it just smiled, the split running clean through its perfect face. And still, she couldn't stop looking. "If you want them to love you," the voice murmured, softer now, "you must give everything." She didn't remember when she'd first heard it out loud. Maybe it had always been there, waiting in the silver depths for her to lean close enough to listen. At work, people began to notice her fatigue. They'd say, "You look tired," in that careful, sympathetic tone that was half concern, half judgment. So she smiled wider, spoke brighter, gave more. When she got home, she stood in front of the mirror long into the night. Sometimes she fell asleep there, her forehead resting against the glass. She stopped calling her family, stopped reading, stopped wondering what she used to enjoy before every moment was dedicated to being this shining version of herself. Her life shrank to the size of her reflection. And though she was thinner now, her eyes ringed in purple, her hands trembling when she poured her morning coffee, the mirror never changed. It still showed her flawless, still told her she was perfect, as long as she never looked away. The crack in the glass widened. By then, she no longer tried to hide it. She'd accepted the mirror's fractures the way she accepted her own, as part of the cost. Each day the voice grew clearer, no longer a whisper, but something woven into her thoughts. "You are nothing without me. You must keep looking." They only loved the reflection. At work, she forgot names. She sat in meetings, staring through her colleagues as if they were strangers. When her supervisor spoke to her, her smile snapped on automatically. But inside, she felt nothing. It was worse than sadness, worse than exhaustion. It was emptiness, a hollow space where her real self had once been. Sometimes she caught glimpses of her reflection in other places, the dark surface of her computer monitor, the stainless steel of the break room kettle. But it wasn't the same. Those reflections were unfiltered, raw, showing her wan, brittle and used up. So she hurried home. Always she hurried home. Late one evening, she stood before the mirror with her hands pressed flat against the glass. Her breath misted over the surface. The crack had spread into a spiderweb radiating out from the centre like frost. On the other side, the perfect version of herself waited, still smiling, unbothered by the ruin. "Please," she whispered, voice shaking, "tell me what to do." The reflection leaned forward, closer than it ever had before. "Stay! Stay with me! Stay until you can't remember who you were without me." Something inside her shuddered, a last quiet part of her that still remembered. She hadn't always been this. She hadn't always been an echo. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't look away. She couldn't, because even in her fear, even in her grief, she needed to believe that the woman in the mirror was real, that she could be loved if she just held on a little longer. And in that moment, she understood. She hadn't chosen this. She had surrendered to it. She stopped going to work. At first, she told herself it was burnout, exhaustion. She needed a break, some rest, a moment to breathe, but days passed, then weeks, and the mirror became the only place she existed. She stopped checking her phone, stopped opening her emails. The notifications came, then slowed, then stopped altogether. No one came knocking. Not her supervisor, not her co-workers, not even her friends, what few she still had. They'd gotten used to the surface version of her, the polished mask. When it cracked, they turned away. Inside her apartment, time dissolved. She no longer ate meals, only nibbled on dry crackers or sipped from cold mugs of coffee when her body screamed too loud. But the mirror was always there, always waiting. And in it, she was still radiant, still loved. Even as her real body withered, cheeks sunken, eyes shadowed, skin pale and brittle, the woman in the mirror remained untouched, perfect. One night, in the dead silence of 3 a.m., she stared at her reflection for so long her own features felt unfamiliar. And the voice came again, no longer coaxing, not even commanding, just truth, plain and final. "You've given me everything. There's nothing left of you I don't own." She didn't speak. She didn't argue, because it was true. She had spent so long trying to become the woman in the mirror that she no longer remembered how to be anyone else. There was no before anymore. Only this. The smooth, glowing mask, and the silence behind it. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the glass. It was no longer cold. And this time, her reflection moved first.